Good morning, everyone. So, we have a lot of, I think, talks about success factors. What can you do to be successful with agents and so on? I want to take a slightly different approach, which is, I think there's a lot of things that we do, but maybe there's some that we're neglecting, not spending enough time on. So let's dive into that. Maybe for fun, though, let's look at other hype cycles from the past before we get to agents. The internet, when that came out, we were told that everything's going to go online. Maybe we won't have stores anymore, right? Then mobile apps came along because we'd use those websites. And then when mobile apps came along, it's like, well, we don't need those websites anymore because everything will be mobile first, mobile only, right? All kinds of sensors and the device is with you all the time. And then there's the metaverse. Is Subu here? Not here yet? Okay, Asim, when you, Subu's from Meta, by the way. So when you interview him, please ask him about this one. Okay, like what happened to the metaverse? Okay. All right, good. And then the blockchain, right? So the whole idea is we decentralize all business. And you don't have to trust any organization, but I think we just really aren't ready for that. It's still in its infancy. And then when deep learning and machine vision got really good many years ago, we thought AI models, we don't have to write logic anymore, right? The models are going to figure everything out. No one has to really explicitly do that stuff. And then we got today, right? So with AI coding agents, many people are saying you don't need SaaS software, right? Why pay, sorry, Simon. Why pay companies for SaaS software, right? Because you can just write code quickly with an AI agent and it can be bespoke, okay? Much less work. You don't even need programming teams anymore because the coding agents will do it. And then we get to AI agents, right? So what are the claims you're hearing now about the agentic revolution, right? So Bill Gates thinks that we'll just, in the future, pretty soon, 3-4 years from now, we'll just talk to our devices. You're not really going to think about apps. They'll just do what you want. It's almost like if Alexa actually is modernized regenerative AI and you can just ask it to do anything and it works, right? Jensen Huang from NVIDIA has kind of an interesting take. I think there's many IT leaders out here. He thinks you're all going to become HR departments for a fleet of agents. That's his bold claim. And Satya Nadella has talked about how another take on SaaS apps, which is that basically they're just going to become databases that store transactions, and all the business logic is going to go move into an agentic layer. And if you break these down further, you can say basically, if agents can do anything and we want to agentify everything, well, who needs policy and rules, right? Because just give the agent your docs and it will read and extract the policies from there. Who needs workflow engines, right? Simon talked a little bit about this with you a moment ago, because if the agent can plan and reason, why have an explicit workflow? Why have a decision tree, right? If you're going to diagnose a machine fault, or if you're going to figure out what's wrong with the patient, what the treatment course should be, you don't need those flow charts because agents can supposedly do all this. We already talked about the engineers. And UX design, here's another interesting one, right? How often have you heard that, hey, we can just put a conversational UI on top of everything and we're done, right? So we know this is a lot of, there's some balance here. It's never that simple. It's never all or nothing. And so despite all the hype, okay, we're very practical people, all of you together. When we're building solutions with agents, we're doing a lot of things right. Okay, and I don't want to really talk about these today other than name them. So we experiment and start small. We imagine new business processes. We are looking at testing, responsible AI, cost and ROI, and picking the right technology and partners and upskilling teams, right? But the question is, are we still neglecting some big success factors, right? That additional things beyond that list, we need to do all that stuff, and I'm glad we're doing it. I see all of you and other customers focusing, but are there things that we're not spending enough time on? So I think there are the three at the top here. So first of all, if we're going to be innovative with business processes, we actually need to make sure our users, our stakeholders, our businesses, our boards understand all that's possible, right? And I think sometimes not everyone has a broad view of the capabilities to even imagine and think big. Secondly, agents also need enterprise architecture, right? You can't just build a whole bunch of agents or give 7 teams different jobs to build out agentic solutions, and then hope that something structured and reusable and mature will come out of it, right? Like the stuff that Simon demoed, it's also a result of enterprise architecture thinking when it's at the ServiceNow internal level or for their clients. And then product design, right? So let's think beyond conversational UIs. So those are the 3 things that we'll talk about today. And by the way, while doing it, just to reinforce the message that I think Christoph and Ashutosh and others have given yesterday and today, there's AI tools out there that can make us 10x employees. So we should be able to do all these things a lot faster and more effectively. So let's dive into the first one. What are the new capabilities we get with Agentic AI? I feel like, tell me with a show of hands, do you feel like this is what most of your peers think of as, when you say agents and generative AI, this is what they think of. They think of like a ChatGPT interface, right? Yes, to some extent. So we don't want them to have this limited view. So what are some additional capabilities? I've got like 8 examples on 2 slides here. So generating drafts, the categories at the bottom of the slide. We've seen this, summarize, help me draft an email, help me draft a comment for a check-in into Git, help me draft code. There's summarization, long email chain, what's the gist of it? Extracting, so expense management tools have gotten a lot better because what they do now is they not only are doing the recognition of handwriting and receipts better, they're categorizing automatically, they're applying policy. So there's a lot of automation here that changes the game to make that experience better. Classifying and routing, so again, like when you're in an IT help desk or service or support situation, there's a lot of triage, a lot of routing to the right people or to the right agents. That's an inbuilt, that's a specific capability. And then there's search and retrieve, okay? So Glean is an example of a product that can look at all of your enterprise knowledge base, and just as Perplexity lets you ask a question about everything on the web, Glean lets you ask a question about everything in your enterprise. And is there anyone here from Microsoft today? No, right? Okay, I'm gonna ask a controversial question. Who's tried this stuff inside of Microsoft 365 Copilot? Yes. And what do you think?
Not that great.
It sucks. At this. I don't know why, but it just doesn't do this really well. Anyway, I'm sure they're going to make it better. Planning is another capability, right? So if agents can reason and take steps and we apply it judiciously, that's another thing that we need to imagine in our new business processes. And then using tools. So again, just a little bit of terminology. To an agent, a tool is a way of interacting with the environment. So it could call an API in an enterprise system. It can do a search. It can retrieve information. It can make a change on a customer's account, right? So that makes them powerful because they can take actions. And finally, there's multimodal capabilities. These are getting a lot better now in the sense that before you'd have vision models and text models and audio models. Now there's ones that can understand all of the context together. And if you give like a rich document as input, there's relationships between graphs and images and text. It can derive meaning from it. Now, at the same time, we want to make sure people don't imagine stuff that's not practical today. So what are the limits? If you just look at the right side of the slide, I'll just give you some examples. So tacit knowledge, right? The AI needs to know, it needs the knowledge to be able to take action. So it can't imagine what's in our head. It also can't extract tribal knowledge until it's written down. Creativity. We personify these tools that create videos and images and have interesting chats with us, but they're really remixing and rehashing. They're not creating something original. They're probably just mixing up in different combinations what's already out there. And it seems innovative, but we still need people to do this part. Business judgment, prioritization. This is another example where like an optimizer that might make, like what's the best route for a truck? It's a different kind of problem from what's the best decision for some step you want to take with your business. So we still need people to help factor in geopolitics and urgency and other things that are not accessible to these models in a simple way. Multimodal fusion is like both a capability but also an emerging area. There's limits to what can be done there. Real-time action, you all know how the response time is slow on these things. So if you have a real-time system, we still need to use other technology. And I kind of go on in the interest of time. So in summary, the first point I want to make is that we need to spend more time with our stakeholders, making sure they understand the new capabilities and the limits of what agentic systems can do so that we can imagine better business processes and also imagine ones that are practical to build. The second thing that we were talking about is enterprise architecture. And I think if you're at a larger company, you probably have an EA team, and you've already asked them to take care of how agents fit into that. But I also see with some of our clients that there's a little bit of hoping, okay, that if we just start building and a bunch of teams do it, that somehow sensible people will build a sensible architecture. I think it needs a proactive effort, and that's why I put it on the list of one of the often neglected success factors. Imagine you are an e-commerce company, okay? I got these examples from the website at the bottom here. I like their diagrams. So if you're we'll look at an agent or a business problem level first, and then we'll zoom out to the enterprise. So modular design is a big point. A customer support agent, if you look at the left, needs to look up orders, it needs to deal with logistics, it needs to deal with policy, account information, and so on. We could build one agent, and by using the word monolithic, you already know what I think of it, one monolithic agent that does all of that. Or, as we do with enterprise architecture or just architecture in general, you could break it down into an orders agent, into a returns agent, a policy agent, and then have one at the top, an orchestrator, a front door that decides which one to invoke when. And exchange, take outputs of one and the other and stitch them together into a meaningful flow or resolution. So the solution on the right is easier for us as humans to reason about, like, will it work? Because we can think about what the order agent's job is, and that's the architecture task, right? What is the job of the orders agent? What is the job of the returns agent? When we did microservices, and we're still doing them, it's the same problem, right? But now in an agent context. So this makes it easier to test, evolve, maintain. If you zoom out to an enterprise level, right, this same e-commerce company has many functions across the enterprise. We have to make these decisions everywhere. And there's even more departments not represented here, like HR and so on, right? So there's a lot of functions of a typical company that are part of your enterprise architecture. And you've got, some of these are handled by ERP systems, you've got custom microservices, you have your products if you have like online systems like Disney streaming and everything. All those are part of the ecosystem. So I'm not going to show you a diagram of what a good enterprise architecture looks like, but instead let's ask some questions. Like, what should an EA team do when they're thinking about this? So the first thing is, what are the common parts? So just like you have decided that you have certain microservices, like for identity and access management, for payments that might be used by many parts of your business, you have to ask the same question about agents. What are the parts that are going to be reused, right? So maybe there's logistics functions that are needed when you're doing a normal order flow. Also, when you're handling exceptions like there's a late delivery or when there's a product recall, they might all involve the returns process or a logistics agent. So those might be some shared parts. And then the tools that we talked about, right? Interfaces to ERP systems. If 7 agents need access to some APIs in SAP, or ServiceNow or Salesforce or something else, you're going to want to factor them out, build them in a common way, and then reuse them, right? So someone has to think about these decisions. Integrations, right? So those tools are going to talk to APIs. There's also interfaces to data lakes and data warehouses, right? This is Simon also demonstrated some of that, right? The whole dashboard aspect. Identity and access management, right? Nobody wants to log into something, yet another system, and at the same time, you want an enterprise governance. The next set of concerns are around the right technology. So again, because of all the tool suites out there, all of the open source stacks, everything from the hyperscalers, there's a lot of capability. We're constantly messaged with this idea that agentic AI can do everything. But it's not the right tool for every job, right? So you have to ask the question, should I have explicit policy and rules and still have a rules engine or code, or am I going to have an agent make that decision? And it's not a straightforward, it's not the same answer for every problem. Are you going to have explicit workflow versus agentic planning? That's a discussion you guys just had a few minutes ago, right, before I got up. There are going to be cases where, let's say you're a credit bureau, and there's a process to dispute information on the credit report. There's a lot of steps that have to happen in sequence, because if you don't do them, then you're going to very potentially, like, you might give access to a fraudster who made that manipulation on your credit, right? Or you might deny the legitimate person who's trying to repair their credit. And so there's a reason why there's specific steps that these teams will take when you call them to resolve a dispute of information. I would not want an agent to be reasoning about that. Maybe for one of the steps, the agent could look at evidence, but I would not want that workflow to be one where we just ask, an OpenAI LLM to go decide what to do. And then there's also, I think, in the world of generative AI, sometimes we think too much about generative AI and forget about traditional AI. Okay, if you're going to forecast, you're going to forecast, right? If you're going to classify things, there's still reasons why you might want to build a traditional model with AI. So in your enterprise architecture, that EA team needs to think about what's the right solution for each of these, for each business problem. And finally, standardization of technology, right? So I think we usually think of that as a concern. So beyond AI, which AI cloud stack do you want to use and which LLMs, and now agent orchestration frameworks like Crew and LangGraph and so on, there's another interesting thing that's happening, right? All of the ERP systems, all of the SaaS and CRM and servicing systems that you use, just like we've seen from Now Assist and Agentforce, they have their own tools for you to build agents, okay? And then you have these tools like Bedrock and from Vertex, from GCP, and so on. So what do? Do you build everything in the kind of the cloud stack of your choice, all of your agentic stuff there, or do you build it only in the worlds where your data resides, like in ServiceNow and in Agentforce? I think it's probably a hybrid. So now there's another EA enterprise architecture decision here about how do you distribute your agent logic on different tech stacks. We're probably in a heterogeneous world now, right? Because if you've got native functionality in ServiceNow, build the agent in there, right? Because it'll be easy, right? And it naturally has a home with all of the APIs and tools and data integrated. But now if you have something that's cross-enterprise as a use case, you're going to have to figure out a way for these agents to interact with each other. And that's where some of these protocols like Model Context Protocol and agent-to-agent are ways of helping you to work across different technology boundaries. So, in short over here, I think the key point is don't hope for a better enterprise architecture. Actually, give a mandate to your teams, and you might start small and experiment with several agents here and there, but at some point you're going to have to give a remit to a team, I think, to figure out how to do it. All right, and then the final thing I want to talk about is product design. And I am not a designer, okay, any more than, in a way we're all designers because we have opinions on like, this is easy to use, that's not. So from that point of view, here's a couple of thoughts, right? I personally feel like there's too much attention given to conversational UIs, right? You've got a complicated mortgage app, and so I think Alpa's here, right? You probably went through some design cycles where you're trying to figure out, can we just take Rocket Mortgage's UI for applying for loans and replace it with a chat, okay? And that, I think, same thinking goes in a lot of places. I'm not sure that's the right idea all the time, okay? But how many of you think that's like the first thing that comes into mind? Yeah? I think it's a very frequent thought. So the interesting thing is that with generative AI, there's something unique about the technology that it's not just that it gives us new functions, I think it gives us new design choices for the software, for how it interacts with users. Okay, and this first one that I call AI co-creation, I think is a great example of something that was very difficult in the past. Okay, And the whole idea here is that the human and the AI can both edit the same thing and take turns. And it's very fluid. So if you want to go manually edit the document, go edit the document. But then if you want the agent to help recommend additional bullet points or refine your language, it can go modify your document. But after you modify the document, the agent is still aware of your changes, right? Does anybody remember older technology like 4GL? Okay, this was another wave from the past that was going to try to replace armies of programmers working in, I can't remember what languages back then, C or Visual Basic, or I actually don't remember which generation it aligned with. But the problem is that you edit a spec at a high level, and then it generates a system, but then it's not quite right. But now if a programmer edits that system, the compiler doesn't know what to do with it anymore. It's like a one-way trip. It can only generate, but it can't read what's there already and then go back and forth. That's the unique thing that generative AI provides us, and that means that when you build user interfaces, you have a new tool. AI review is, I think, easy to understand. It's like a one-way thing. Maybe you're reviewing code. Okay, submit a pull request, and the code reviewer agent can give feedback. AI automation is kind of headless, right? So if you're going to have some tasks in HR onboarding performed automatically, you don't really think about a UI, but there's a thing on the back end that's automating and making decisions, right? So the design space is simpler. But two more, I think, deserve attention here. So guided resolution. When you're fixing a machine, right, wouldn't it be great if it can just, the camera can see the world, it can look at the machine, it can look at evidence and other sensors and recommend what to do next, right? So that whole user design, that product design paradigm is now interesting because it's not about snap a photo, it makes a decision, it does something. It's kind of like, I don't know what it would look like, and honestly, I was trying to find screenshots of some system that does this well. I couldn't find one right now, but I think this is another thing that's very possible with technology. I do have a medical example I'll give you a screenshot of that's not quite the same thing, but a little bit of it. And then tutoring and testing are interesting because you're trying to help the student find the answer, but not give it away. And that leads to another whole design experience. And then there's a modality question, right? So we always think of, I think, typing and voice when we think of conversational UIs with generative AI. But another possibility now is, of course, to more deeply integrate video, gestures, as I just said, the camera looking at the surroundings, screen capture. So we're seeing demos of this stuff. I don't think we've seen really rich products yet, but it's something that we need to incorporate into our design processes. So let's look at a few examples. Figma is obviously a very popular tool for building user interfaces. I don't use it, I'm not a designer, but our team uses it quite a bit. So the screenshot here is one where you see on the right side, you see the design in progress, right? So this is someone's designing a dashboard. It's showing information, it's a bar chart, and there's a legend and so on. And there's a chat window here. So the agent in Figma, you can tell it, hey, I want to add, I want the data point, the values to show up when I hover my mouse over a bar, right? A common request. So in this case, the designer decided to ask the agent to do it, and it can make the change. But at the same time, the designer could have just gone ahead and made the change directly. And they can just switch back and forth. It's not a one-way trip. So if the designer had made the change, the AI would still know that it was done, and it would be part of the context. This is the part that I think is uniquely possible today with AI, with generative AI, because it can read your asset as it's evolving, okay? So I think there are going to be a lot of great examples of this, right? And it's, by the way, has anybody used ChatGPT's Canvas mode? Yeah? It's pretty cool because it's basically ChatGPT, but now you have two panes. You have your document here, like at one point, maybe you're trying to find some audio equipment, and you've got some, some requirements. You want a certain power of amplifier. You want certain numbers of, channels, and you want it to support Dolby Atmos, and you have a price budget. and you want it to come back and give you a list of options, right? So what it did is it actually wrote my requirements in bullet points at the top of the document, and then it built a list of all the items with an explanation of how they address the attributes, and then a summary table. That's what it came back with. But then I could go edit the requirements list and say, you know what, I don't want a $1,000 limit, I want a $500 limit on the price. Okay, and then it goes and refreshes the document. Like, that's all I had to do, right? So it's pretty cool, right? And at the same time, I could type in the chat window, hey, I have another constraint here, you know, and it goes and adds it and refreshes. So it's just a fluid experience. This is something I just discovered recently. Abridge is a company that's providing medical technology for clinicians, for doctors and therapists and other people who interact with the patient, and then they have a big job afterwards that we don't see. They have to create notes. And those notes are needed, one, because the patient wants to know a summary of what was discussed. All right? The second thing is that insurance is not going to pay unless all the codes are in there correctly. And then finally, you know, there's all this follow-up and action. What's the next test to order? Should we change the medication and so on? And so the way Abridge works is it's got a mobile app. If the patient agrees, the mobile app is listening to the conversation during the consultation. It's just on, and the doctor's not typing anything, no note-taking going on. Obviously with patient consent, right? By the way, how many of you would agree to that? I would, right? Yeah. It's a big, putting a lot of trust in all their privacy controls, but I think we have it pretty well in the healthcare field. So then afterwards, what it does is it creates this note interactively, which has all the insurance coding, which has a summary of the top diagnoses. And I don't have a lot of enough UI screenshots here, but it's very interactive. So it thinks that these are the top 3 conditions that we need to discuss. You can, the doctor can drag and drop and change their prioritization order. And then when it's also explaining its results, like why does this medication dose need to be changed, and it also brings in the patient conversation if the patient had chat. So all the context is there. That's the other aspect. It's not just using the information from that specific meeting or that specific consultation. It's also using all the context from the medical records of the patient and everything else to produce this thing. So of course, their video testimonials, you know, talk about doctors who are amazingly happy with this. But it's just another great example of product design, right? So now it's split into 2 phases. One is this audio recording, and the second part is what happens afterwards. I was thinking of like Teams and Zoom when I saw this, right? And meeting notes. But I think where that breaks down today, okay, is that while the first part is happening, right? The meeting app is recording what's happening. The second part isn't so great. Because when it creates the meeting note summary, it's not using all the context of, like, what did these particular participants, like, let's say it's a Tavant sales meeting, right? So I would want it to build on what action items were from the last meeting, what one of you all said, you know, in the prior meeting, and anything else when it builds those meeting notes. But no, those meeting notes are built on just what was said in that single situation. But in the medical context here, they've brought that all in. And the final example I want to give you is Conmigo. Okay, so you've all heard of Khan Academy, but how many of you heard of Conmigo? Wow, 1 person. Okay, more of you have children of that age than just Mohammed. Okay, and so Conmigo is their AI tutor, and they built this quite a while ago. It does a couple of things. Okay, so the first thing it does is if you're a child might want to know about history and say, hey, I'd like to speak to George Washington. And then it does role-playing like character AI. So Conmigo can become George Washington. And it's designed for children, so there's a lot more guardrails there on what it will say and not say. And you can interact with it, right? The thing I'm demoing here is guided tutoring on a math problem. Is Rabor here, by the way?
Yeah, right here.
Okay, so can you read my question? So it's, I told it, help me solve a problem. Manish gave Vibhor, and I do mean him, okay? 4 bottles of wine for safekeeping, okay? In the wine fridge. He has a wine fridge in his office, okay? I don't know why it's in his office, but that's how it worked at Tavant. It's in his office. Asim, also here, gave him 3 bottles. And then Vibor drank one on his own. Okay. If each bottle yields 5 glasses of wine, how many glasses of wine can we serve with what's left? So I didn't put the whole chat history in here, but it starts asking me questions on how I would start, okay? And so I think the first question that's not here is, so how many bottles are left after, and sorry, there's a question before that. So I say 6, I answer correctly. Then the next question is, so how many servings of wine is that? I put in 7 times 5, which is deliberately wrong, but then you see what it says, right? It doesn't say, no, sorry, the answer is, is 30 and not 35, or the math is wrong. It basically says, it's trying to nudge me towards the right resolution, okay? So this is a really simple example, and by the way, Conmigo, you could put in calculus problems, and it will guide you through a calculus solution. It will not give away the answer, right? All the other AI we build, what's the goal? To give the answer, right? Now, when you're training an operator, when you're training a clinician, when you're training a student, right, we want them to learn the art of problem solving, right? So this is, I think, a whole nother design paradigm which is possible with generative AI, because this doesn't have to be scripted, right? There's so many paths this conversation could take. I could have made so many different mistakes. I could have asked any math problem, right? And that's what I think makes it impressive. So, that's the last point I wanted to make, which is basically that product design, I think, needs a lot more thinking than we have given it, and that's because there's so much new powerful capability in the tool. So just summary one more time. While we're doing a lot of things right in terms of building solutions with generative AI, I think these are 3 that need a lot more attention. Make sure our peers, our stakeholders, our users, they're all aware of the new capabilities. Make sure those enterprise architecture teams, that you have them and that you've given them some role in making sure they have an answer for how agents fit in. And finally, the product design that we just talked about. We have a few more minutes, so questions? Yes, Senthil.
Manish, thank you. This is great content, by the way. We are trying to do some work around agentic AI, right? And most of what I hear, the value proposition-wise, is really summarization, right? So agents will summarize the data or do something along those lines. And so when I look at the value proposition, right, I look at my enterprise architects who understand the enterprise systems. Then I have product architects who understand the products. And you're all talking about this new area that's emerging, right, with AI, agents, and agentic AI, and what a true agency to the agents to make decisions, right? Whereas most of the hype is built around, hey, these agents will have agency to make decisions. Most of what it's doing today is what I would call as traditional integrations and rule-based, work, right? So in terms of, okay, so that's an observation, right? But when we talk about a true agentic, solution, right? In a world where enterprises, you have many enterprises, like you have many systems in an enterprise, including your own products that are running in those enterprises. You will end up deploying agents in so many different platforms, right? And today, right, with microservices, you had to create this new category of jobs, right, with DevOps and managing deployments and the whole process. With agents, right, and deployment of agents, you don't have those necessary skill sets to even manage across different, platforms, environments, because you can deploy agents in ServiceNow, you can deploy agents in Workday, you can deploy agents in so many different places, right? That's where the future is going. Where does this go in terms of, like these new categories of jobs that may emerge, right? Like your observation, would love to hear.
I feel that maybe it's not such a radical shift, right? So DevOps has evolved into data ops and ML ops, and right? And we keep adding, so agents are another kind of AI. So from the point of view of observability and governance, some additional new concerns come up, right? Like how you test an agent where it's a very open-ended interface. Testing requires new disciplines, right? But for a lot of other things, like how do you deploy agentic software? How do you observe whether it's running and up or down, that kind of level of system monitoring, it's not really different. It's just another technology that came in, just like your other microservice. So I think that part is similar. And the heterogeneity of having agents on many platforms, we already have that, right? So like there was a day when we would talk about we need to standardize in a programming language, right? But I bet that at big companies like Meta, maybe they started out with PHP, I believe, right? But now they probably have a whole multitude of languages in which they program, and it's okay, as long as there's standard APIs and how things can interact. So why is it any different with agents? If we build agents on 5 different stacks, because there's a natural home for each agent, right? Because it's closely associated with some enterprise functionality in some system. Let it be, right? So it's not something to standardize away with one way of building it. It's more of figure out what are those interoperability APIs. Those are immature, they're new, right? Like REST is very well established, but A2A is newer, right? So there's going to be a lot more learning and a lot more, I think, broken things along the way. But it's not fundamentally different.
I hope so.
Yes.
Hey, Manish, great presentation. I was thinking about the success factors that you mentioned, right? And thinking about the healthcare use case that you brought.
Yeah.
So it is one thing to have a agent summarize your meeting minutes, and if you ask me to do it twice, it might give you 2 different answers. But if you
Right.
go to a healthcare app,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking if another success factor is going to be important is repeatability and explainability.
That's right. That's right.
Because in the healthcare, you can't say, well, today I'm diagnosing you with X, and tomorrow, if you ask me the same question,
Yeah.
I'm going to diagnose you with Y. So is that also something we have to keep in mind as we think about?
Yeah, I'm so like everyone has their views on how aggressive they want to be with how much they let the AI do the thinking, so to speak. I'm kind of in the middle right now. I'm a more practical guy, so I feel like when you have a problem, like if we were to try to build a bridge, if that's the task ahead of us, I would decompose it into a lot smaller steps. Because then we, as the developers, designers, architects of the system, can be sure that certain things will happen. So if you want repeatability in how notes are done, it's not like, hey, here's all the information, build me a note. It's like, no, well, I want the note to have these sections. Okay? When you're doing insurance coding, here's a database of all the ICD-10, I can't remember what the thing is, codes are. And there may be some actual purpose-built software that helps with coding that we're not just trusting the agent to do. Right? So at each of those steps, I think to create the repeatability and the confidence in the solution, you can decompose these giant problems into smaller steps. Where I get worried is when we do a demo where you throw a whole bunch of shit at an agent and then it comes out with a nice looking answer, and then we're proud of it. But it's not repeatable. It's not testable.
Right, so I was talking to Raj yesterday, sorry, but,
Yeah.
but is the future then that you always have human in the loop? Or the future that at some point will replace the human in the loop with another agent whose job is to check the output of these other agents? Where do you think
We're going to see all these combinations, but what I meant when I said that we decompose a problem, that's a build time concern. So we're letting a human architect or developer or product designer decide how to take the big problem and break it into a series of steps, parallel, sequential, whatever, right? And that way that whether we use AI coding or an AI tool or manual coding to build one of those solutions, right, for one of the steps, we're at least confident that the whole sequence will be applied and we can have more repeatability. This other thing of like, there are going to be things that the AI can't do or where it needs human review. Like in the case of a bridge, the doctor is reviewing the notes before they're published. The doctor is reviewing the meds, the changes to the medications before they're sent to a pharmacy. So that's there. And so I think it's just a usual thing that there are going to be high stakes use cases where everything has to be reviewed by a human, and there's going to be cases where, you know what, it's a $10 loss even if we made a mistake, who cares? So just automate it completely, right? I mean, I don't think any of that changes. So it's like with any other technology that came in the past, which is why I opened that way. It's that everything comes with this amazing set of bold claims and promises, but we know that there's practical ways of building systems today. That's what I personally am more interested in. What can happen in 5 years? There's enough people imagining that and making claims that we have to get stuff done now, right? Yes, Bill.
So in the Get Stuff Now camp, and maybe you're gonna, this is like karaoke. Maybe we're going to get to this later.
As long as you're singing and not me.
Are you sure? And maybe we're going to get to this later, but we, as human beings, hold the computer to a much higher standard of reliability and accuracy that we will hold a human
Yes,
to.
yes.
So to your medical example, like if my doctor mistypes my name or whatever, or gets something a little bit wrong, I'm like, okay, it's fine, right? But if the machine gets it wrong, I'm really upset with that. And so I'm wondering, in this sort of trying to bring it out of the theoretical and into the practical, how do we bridge that, right? What's your thinking? Or is it not bridgeable and these agents just have to be perfect?
I don't know. I mean, you tell me what you think, but some quick thoughts are, as we adopt it more, right, we will find some new balance as users, right? So the skepticism is what's leading to the high bar, the lack of the limited penetration, right? And I think that's where the line will move, and oftentimes the convenience will override the mistakes, right? But also we're going to get better. I mean, the technology will get better.
But isn't it also the use case? Look, if you have a
Yeah.
single decision being made and there's $1 million on the line and you make it wrong, right, and you're liable for that, you're not having an agent just do that. But if you have a summary made from your meeting, that is whether the wording of that doesn't matter so much.
I wish it was true. In my experience, when my chatbot gives a wrong answer, and by the way, it gave a wrong answer because the source documentation, which was updated by human beings, was incorrect. The chatbot wasn't incorrect, like all that, okay? When that is wrong, I will hear that on town halls do you remember that time it said 5 cents instead of 7 cents? Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. And I will hear that, and people will repeat it. Like there is this natural, maybe you're calling it skepticism.
Come on, Bill. We do that in a meeting. If somebody makes a faux pas in a meeting, it's also discussed endlessly, right? Sometimes for decades,
now you're going
right?
back to my singing.
All right, I think we need to move on. We're beyond the time for this session, but thank you for the great questions. All right.